It's a cold winter afternoon as you walk through the historic neighborhood of Inglewood. But thanks to a warm Chinook, it's starting to feel like a spring afternoon. You've decided to have lunch at one of the best restaurants in the city. Just up ahead, you see the beautiful 2-story red brick historic home. With each step, you can smell the fabulous cuisine circulating inside. Walking through the front door, you see the dark wood and historic elements that showcase the heritage home. You're seated next to a window with beautiful views of the Elbow River and the 9th Avenue Bridge. It's a quiet day, and there are only a few couples in the dining room with you. You take a deep breath as you relax in your seat when all of a sudden you smell cigar smoke. You look around, but no one in the dining room is smoking. The smell intensifies. It's as if someone is smoking right next to you. The waitress comes to take your order, but before you answer, you tell her about the smell. She lets out a little laugh and says, "Don't worry, that's just one of the many ghosts." I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Join me as we travel to Calgary to revisit one of Alberta's most haunted and historic buildings. This is the story of the Deane House. If you're a longtime listener, today's story might sound a little familiar. I shared a shorter version of it when this podcast first started. Since then, I've thought about the Deane House a lot and wanted to revisit. That's because the high, blocky, evilish structure is bold. From the second you see it, you know that once upon a time, it imposed on the land. The Deane House doesn't blend in with nature. It is clearly meant to stand out and is a rare example of early architecture in southern Alberta. Its prominent position on a large, mainly open lot on a major thoroughfare has long made this building a city landmark. For almost 120 years, it has been a staple in the community, located at the confluence of the Bow and the Elbow River, in the heart of Blackfoot territory, once known as Mokinsi. It is characterized by a boxy square shape with red brick, a green roof with white trims and accents. It has 4 rooms on each floor, a large front porch, and a center dormer on the 2nd story, creating a distinct 4-square appearance. The house was built in 1906 by Captain Richard Burton Deane, who served as a Northwest Mounted Police Superintendent in Calgary. Deane was born in India in 1848. Growing up, he was described as an adequate student who excelled in sports, especially cricket. At 18, he sought adventure and joined the Royal Marines and became a 2nd lieutenant. By 1881, he had served 15 years in the Army, was married, and had 5 children. Seeing no further advancement in his position, Deane retired early. He packed up his family and moved to Canada a year later. Deane was a strong, vaguely threatening presence with a drooping mustache, a tall and lean frame, pale complexion, cold eyes, and an acerbic tongue. Using the influence of his cousin, Thomas Charles Patson, a prominent member of the Canadian elite, he secured a position as aide to the Governor-General for a few months. In his close proximity to the government, he was able to eventually persuade Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald to make him an inspector in the Northwest Mounted Police on July 1, 1883. He traveled to the new police headquarters in Regina, Saskatchewan, where he proved to be a capable leader and quickly rose through the ranks to become superintendent. During the Northwest Resistance of 1885, Deane was left in charge. Once the conflict ended, he became responsible for the prisoners. One of them was the notorious Louis Riel. Riel was a Métis leader and was central in bringing Manitoba into Confederation. The Métis people considered Riel a hero who was a voice for their concerns and aspirations. He led 2 rebellions against the Government of Canada post-Confederation, and in 1885 he was hanged for high treason. But it seems that Louis Riel must have at least respected Deane. Riel was allowed to write in the commissioner's office, and he even dedicated a poem to Deane. In 1886, the commissioner was removed, and Deane thought he would replace him. Instead, a man with better connections and longer service in Western Canada took the role. The two butted heads and clashed at every turn, so Deane was sent east on a recruiting trip before finally being given command of the relatively new division in Lethbridge in 1888. Deane went on to command for nearly 26 years, including Lethbridge, Fort Macleod, Maple Creek, and finally in Fort Calgary. Built in 1875 as a part of the Northwest Mounted Police larger effort to stop American rum and whiskey runners in the region, by 1882 it had expanded to become a prestigious district post. Deane arrived in July 1906, and a new house was built for the incoming superintendent, as everything else was deemed unfit for his family. The new home was built for $6,200, and construction began in August the same year. Deane ordered his staff to, quote, "Give the working party all the meat they want to eat, and charge the excess ration to me, but tell them also that I want to be living in the house by Christmas." End quote. Prisoners from the Fort Calgary guardroom excavated a large cellar, laid cement foundations, and made water and sewer connections. Captain Deane described the house as, quote, "certainly the best house in the Royal Mounted occupancy at that date," end quote. It was completed on December 1st, 1906, but by then his wife Martha had passed. She had been sent to the Pacific Coast to treat an undisclosed illness, but died the day before Christmas Eve in 1906. Deane spent the holidays arranging her burial in Lethbridge before settling into his new home. The family moved in, and by the summer of 1907, Captain Deane made preparations to entertain His Royal Highness Prince Fushimi of Japan. Deane wrote, quote, "Some angel of light had suggested to him that he should see Calgary on his way through the Rocky Mountains," end quote. He went on to say, quote, "In reply to the official letter, I said that I would be glad to entertain the prince and his suite to luncheon," end quote. The house had a 12-foot wide veranda on the south and east sides. That is where Deane entertained Prince Fushimi of Japan. On that occasion, a decorative screen of shrubs was arranged on the front of the porch, where a band played for the royal. Captain Deane planted and organized the lawn and gardens and arranged shrubs that day. The visit was a great success, and the viceregal party left for Banff, where they spent a few days as the prince hoped to fish. He was successful and was delighted with laughter, something he hadn't done since they had left Montreal. After the visit, Deane fell ill and was tended to by a nurse who he fell deeply in love with. He remarried in 1908, just days before his 60th birthday, so that his bride would be eligible for the widow's pension. But that was not to be, as she became gravely ill in 1911, and after a long battle with poor health, died in 1914. The same year, the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway purchased the land and Fort Calgary closed. The company tore down every building except for one, the Deane House. But by now, the house wasn't Captain Deane's home anymore. He had essentially been kicked off the home and garden he had so carefully tended to since 1906. He soon retired and returned to England. After Captain Deane's departure, the house was used as a station attendant's living quarters but was moved to the southeast corner of the property where it sat for 15 years. Then it fell into disrepair until 1929 when entrepreneur C.L. Jacques purchased it. He moved the house across the Elbow River on cross-log pilings to its present location at 806 9th Avenue Southeast by the firm of Charles Riddoch. The magazine Popular Mechanics wrote about the complicated move. In its new location, a new cement foundation was laid, and the house was turned into an apartment building called the Jasper Lodge. From then on, many tragic events occurred. In 1933, a 14-year-old boy and his father were boarding house tenants. The young boy suffered from epilepsy, and while attending a nearby school, he was tormented daily by his classmates. Feeling hopeless by the bullying, the young boy committed suicide in the attic. The incident sent shockwaves across the community. They eventually moved on, and a tragic death would soon be forgotten when World War II broke out in Europe in 1939. Nearly every country participated, and during this time, the Deane House became infamous for prostitution and other illicit behavior. As the Allies and the Axis of Powers battled on the front lines, military personnel in Calgary were given strict orders to stay away from the house. The war ended in 1945, and by 1949, the building had been purchased by Alex Brotherton, who renamed it the Gaspé Lodge because he came from the Gaspé region of Quebec. He had arrived in Calgary just over 20 years earlier and worked as a Canadian National Railway dispatcher until he retired in 1945. That's the same year his wife died, and then 4 years later, he took over the Deane House. Under Brotherton's ownership, the house is rumored to have been the site of many gruesome murders and deaths, although none have been confirmed. We do know that in 1965, Alex Brotherton buried two of his sons within months of each other. First Ernest on March 9th, and then George on June 18th. The sadness must have been too much to bear because Alex Brotherton didn't live much longer. He died about 7 months later on February 17th, 1966, inside the Deane House. Without the family patriarch, responsibilities fell to his daughter, Mary Alphina Brotherton Cunningham. She had been widowed since 1948 and had been living in Calgary for 30 years. Alphina died at 58 years old, just over a year after her father on March 19, 1967. She also took her final breath inside the Deane House. The unrelenting grief had nowhere to go. Without someone to look after the historic home, it fell into disrepair. Then, the house's reputation was sullied even further by a horrific discovery two young girls made on Thursday, March 25, 1971. Roderick J. Upperville was 37 years old and was living inside an apartment at the Deane House with his wife Irma and their two daughters. The couple had a tumultuous and volatile relationship, and it was becoming dangerous. Irma had charged Roderick with assault on March 3rd, and he was supposed to appear in court on March 31st. Those 2 weeks had been filled with fear for the 40-year-old woman. Then, on the evening of Wednesday, March 24th, 1971, the couple got into another heated and violent argument. In a blind rage, Roderick stabbed his wife several times and then strangled her. He then took his own life in an apparent murder-suicide. It is noted in the Calgary Herald newspaper that the following day, on Thursday, March 25th, the two young daughters discovered their parents' dead bodies at 10:30 a.m. and called the police. The children had slept through it all and had not heard any of the commotion. The violent incident left a mark on Calgary. And although the blood was eventually washed away, the house was never the same again. The city of Calgary stepped in and purchased it in 1973. An effort to preserve it was made by the RCMP Century Celebrations Committee. They helped restore the old porch area to a near-original state. Meanwhile, the city turned it into a cooperative studio space for artists and writers, and an exhibition space called the Dandelion Gallery until it closed in 1978. Since then, the Deane House has become a renowned restaurant and tea house loved by tourists and locals alike. However, they're not the only ones who frequent the halls of the historic building. Over the years, strange activity has been observed and reported at the Deane House. While guests visit for an intimate dining experience, many are unaware of the house's tragic past. The Calgary Herald listed the location as one of the city's scariest ghost stories. An article published on October 30th, 2024, mentions that the ghost of a man with a fondness for pipes has reportedly been seen here, as has the apparition of an Indigenous man. It also lists other unexplained phenomenon, including the smell of cigar smoke wafting in the air when no one is smoking, and a disconnected telephone that will occasionally ring. Most frightening, however, is a blood stain on the floor in the attic that reportedly changes in color and size. No matter how hard the staff clean the bloodstains, they never disappear and remain a permanent reminder of the tragic deaths that took place in the house. Many believe it's either from the young 14-year-old boy or from the murder-suicide from 1971. The stains can be found near a closet that will never stay locked. Staff members say that they will lock the door only to return minutes later to find it mysteriously opened again. They will see objects that were once inside the closet now strewn about the room. What makes it so unnerving is that this happens when no one has entered the bedroom. Over 30 years ago, a restaurant manager invited a psychic to try and get some insight into the strange phenomenon. The psychic explored the house and said, quote, "As I walked through the front door, it felt like I was walking through jello, and I witnessed a murder. I saw a man chasing a woman with an axe. He bludgeoned her to death." End quote. Other horrific encounters have been witnessed by staff. An employee shared the experience of going to the basement to get some supplies when she had a run-in with an apparition of a man she described as having long black braids. When she saw him, she stopped dead in her tracks and heard him say, quote, "You shouldn't be here. This site is sacred." End quote. The employee just stood there, terrified. Then shortly after, he vanished right in front of her eyes. Many other strange and unnerving things continue to happen in the historic home. Staff will hear lights going on and off, hear unexplainable sounds, and a telephone ringing. Other staff have reported hearing voices and beautiful music from the antique piano room located on the second floor. When the piano is heard from the otherwise empty room, staff will investigate, only for it to go silent as soon as they approach. Another terrifying encounter has been when they see a dark figure of a man with no legs below the knees coming down the grand staircase. They will watch him float by, then dissipate into nothing. While those who venture into the Deane House may only be looking for an afternoon tea or an exquisite meal, they never know what they will encounter. So be careful. You never know what spirits will be best paired with a glass of wine, and who knows if you'll have an appetite after you see one. Thank you for joining me on our journey through one of Calgary, Alberta's most historic and haunted houses, the Deane House. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Edmonton Ghost Tours. I will link it in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnston, with help from Roslyn Kufer. If you would like to support this podcast, please follow and share, and if you can give us a like and a 5-star written review, that is always appreciated. Also, you can follow me on our different social media platforms, or if you have a ghost story, haunting, or true crime that you would like for us to cover on this podcast, please email me through the website hauntedcanada.com. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.